Hello fellow Star Trek fans, welcome back to a brand new episode of 10 Forward, the Star Trek show summary and recap series brought to you as part of the Clonestar podcast. I am your host Mike Overton and, well, this week's episode is a little bit bittersweet. We are checking out this week's final ever episode of Star Trek Lower Decks. I can't believe we're saying that after 5 seasons, but there we are. It kind of is what it is and there's not a lot we can do about it, but with that being said, this week's episode is titled The New Next Generation, so let's get into it. An action-packed, heartfelt and laugh-filled episode wraps up the series on a highly satisfying note. The episode begins with a dramatic Klingon cold open as the vengeful Relga confronts the reality-warping fissure introduced in last week's episode's cliffhanger. Back aboard the Cerritos, our lower deckers are reconnecting at the bar, reflecting on their season's arcs. Mariner finds a, filament in her JG role. Boimler obsesses over the alt pad self, and T'Lyn and Tendi from Technobabble duo, and Rutherford grips with outdated Cerritos tech. Boimler's panic over his transporter twin's warning sends him and Mariner to Captain Freeman, who, is surprisingly easy to convince. Alt to pull and all. Starfleet Command agrees. Reality is, kind of on the brinks of collapse. Oh, and the Rift's quantum field can transform you into random multiverse oddities, like giving someone a cactus head. With the Enterprise and other key ships out of reach, it's up to the Cerritos. Call it fate or entanglement, this is your mission. Once again, Starfleet has just one ship to save the universe. Typical, hey? Meanwhile, Mach's Klingon delivery van is attacked by Relga, who seeks vengeance for her lost ship. Malor defies his brother to warp them to the Cerritos for asylum. Freeman, amidst preparations to reconfigure the ship for a quantum phenomena, with, dubious hull protection at best, grants safe harbour. When Relga arrives, accompanied by her, really kind of creepy micro-targ, Freeman refuses to hand over the brothers, despite a suspiciously curt message from Admiral Freeman insisting that she comply. After Relga attacks, the Cerritos disables a bird of prey and warps to the Rift. There, the Schrödinger field of possibilities, as I'm now going to call it, transforms the ship into a Freedom class before Tendi can even nerdsplain. Relga's fleet gives chase into the fissure zone, where one Klingon ship devolves into an ancient barge. All crewmen are lost. Chaos ensues as Tendi and T'Lyn clash over energy allocation. Rutherford fumes over the ship's limitations, and Mars quarrels with Mariner after Boimler's cheat sheet pad suggests that Malor was hidden in an alternate universe. Shax geeks out briefly when the ship becomes the ISS Cerritos with incredible weapons, as he says. But that all grinds to a halt when all systems fail and leaves the crew stranded in the dead of space at Relga's mercy. Perhaps today is a good day to die? Relga threatens to board the ship, but Boimler dramatically snaps his alt pad in solidarity with Mariner, believing that she definitely did not hide Malor. And, he's right. The culprit? Ransom, who disobeyed orders after suggesting the Admiral's message was fake. Kayshon confirms it with a Temerian proverb, though Relga continues her aggression. Freeman is, one step ahead. Billups devises a plan and Ollie uses her demigod powers to neutralise the Klingons' quantum shields, leaving their flagship vulnerable to the, infighting. With Relga defeated and the Cerritos presses on, its form cycling through very iconic ships before returning to its original shape. Rutherford, inspired, dives deep into the warp core to repulse the fissure's energy, enabling the ship to confront the rift head-on. However, the fissure splits the Cerritos into 2 quantum versions. Tendi and T'Lyn, harnessing their, science bestie synergy, reunite the ship just in time to fire the rift closing beam. But it fails. Now what? Malor offers some wisdom about rivers and dams, prompting Mariner to reconfigure the beam, stabilising the rift into a permanent gateway. With time running short, Ma assumes command of Relga's fleet. Starbase 80 is reassigned to oversee as the gateway, and Freeman, she's now in charge, transfers there to explore all of the new realities. Tearful goodbyes follow, but back at the bar, Rutherford impresses a flustered Tendi with his implant-free, handsome look. As Mariner reflects on the Cerritos' crew unique camaraderie, Ransom takes command as the new captain. He shocks Mariner and Boimler by appointing them both as co-provisional first officers. A thing, apparently, as he reassures them, putting them in charge of the lower decks, though wary of how it might affect their friendship, they accept with groans as Ransom unleashes a workout-themed catchphrase, "Engage the core." As Mariner says, this isn't the end of the story, but its beginning. The only thing I can really complain about this week is in the scene where all the ships are shifting, there's a couple of extra seconds spent on the first and second transformations, right? And you get to see all the decks change and the bulkheads change in this, and the L-cast changes as well. But then all of a sudden it kind of speeds up, and it's just a bunch of L-cars just quickly chopping and changing, and it gets a little bit distracting because the ship nerd in me is obviously trying to see what class of ship it is. So that's a little bit frustrating, and I think they could have maybe done a couple of less iterations of the Cerritos and maybe given us some more external shots, because I would have really liked to actually seen a good long in-depth look at the Miranda class Cerritos. But that's just me. So other than the fact that this is the last episode of the show ever, that's the only thing I didn't like this week. There was so much to love about this week's episode. We got to see all the characters again. Whether it was really brief, whether they were starring moments, but we got to see everyone, even Maligno briefly. We even got to see Cetacean Ops, which we haven't seen for quite a while, which is a nice treat. I think some of the funniest parts of this episode is when they're going to that Schrodinger's field, and, well, when the ship goes to Freedom class with only one nacelle, and then there's a whole geeky moment about how can a ship operate with just one nacelle, which is great. Then it goes to the ISS Cerritos with all these wonderful new weapons in there, and then it all kind of falls offline, poor Shax. And then we even get a Sovereign class USS Cerritos. But what I loved about it, and this just goes to the attention to detail that the crew of this show put into it, is it has the Cerritos' nacelles. So you have the Sovereign saucer and body and secondary hull, but you have bigger, longer Cerritos nacelles. So I hope someone gets to make a model of that, because it looked awesome. It really did. And then there's an Birth class in there. That's not going to do an awful lot, but there we are. A couple of Miranda class Cerritos. So it kind of really gives a nice, almost like lineage to the Cerritos name, that she wasn't just a Cali class, and that she's been all of these other really iconic ships throughout the multiverse, which I just thought was a lot of fun, and it was so well done. It just worked. It really did. The other thing I really liked is right at the beginning of the episode, when the Klingons come to it, one of the bird of prey gets entangled in the field, and then they instantly become Discovery-esque Klingons with a Discovery-esque bird of prey before it gets destroyed. But it's that attention to detail that the crew really put into it. You can tell this show is made by Star Trek fans, and I think that is what makes Lower Decks one of the best modern Star Trek shows there is, and I am so gutted that, the show is ending. But, yeah, so much to love with this week's episode. There really is. And I think last week and this week's episode kind of smushed together are my favourite Lower Decks episodes, full stop, I think. They're both brilliant, and we also get to see the transporter clone William Boimler as well, and the ship from last week, that Defiant class ship, which is also just a nice little touch, so we know they didn't die. My standout moment this week is the fact that the ship got to change, and we did get to see some crackers. We got to see an Birth class. We got briefly, we got to see a couple of Miranda class. I love that sovereign class Cerritos with those nacelles is incredible. The other one I can't remember if it was the ISS Cerritos. I think it was the ISS Cerritos has sovereign class nacelles, so it's almost like they just got the wrong ones on, but it worked so well. And again, another model I hope somebody makes as a Cerrito class with those sovereign class nacelles. So yeah, my standout moment this week is that whole insane mishmashing of ships, chopping and changing between the ships, because that's an incredible bit of design and an incredible bit of animation. And well, my hat goes off to all of those people who were involved in that. It was such a great part to the episode. Now, if a show must end before its time, this is how you do it. This supersized finale delivered exactly what we as fans deserved. Well, and more. It packed in thrilling action, expertly tied up all of those plot arcs, and heartfelt character moments, with some clever canon nods and affectionate callbacks to its own legacy, and, well, of course, plenty of laughs. More than that, it is a love letter. It felt like a love opus to both Star Trek and Lower Decks, from the stunning art and production design to the emotional music to the sharp writing and masterful pacing. It's clear that everybody involved poured their hearts into the episode. The cast gave, well, some pretty unforgettable performances, giving their characters the perfect send-off they needed to say goodbye. What stood out was how the show kept its focus on the core cast, balancing the upper and lower deckers. The previous episode acted more as a kind of handoff than a cliffhanger, leaving legacy characters seen but kind of unheard in the final. This allowed Lower Decks to spotlight its own crew, ensuring that everyone, not just the Lower Deckers, had their hero moments. The show's strength lies, well, fully in the developed ensemble, and seen in episodes like Upper Decks, making it more satisfying to watch the entire crew save the day together, or, well, deliver the well-timed gag. Ransom and Freeman's wrap-up, well, felt pitch perfect, and whilst the finale left us wanting more, it's made excellent use of its limited runtime to serve as many characters as possible. The core 5 Lower Deckers had deeply satisfying conclusions with arcs that tie back to the season and series long journeys. Mariner embraced her role as, well, kind of mostly responsible officer. Boimler finally let go of his prized old universe pad, and Tendington leveled up as science besties. Rutherford's arc, whilst kind of ultimately satisfying, felt a little less developed, with his kind of initial anti-Cerritos stance and sudden romantic hits. Kind of felt, I don't know, a little bit rushed maybe? Still, the team threaded the needle beautifully, giving closure whilst leaving a good door open for future adventures. It's reminiscent of the Next Gen's final, All Good Things, a fitting parallel as that show has really inspired Lower Decks, making the finale title the new Next Generation especially apt. A delightful surprise was how seamlessly the finale tied into the entire season. What initially seemed like a standalone episode revealed to be part of a much bigger plan. Ma and Maylor's return as pivotal figures allowed for classic Star Trek style over-the-top Klingon villainy, whilst, well, even smaller elements like Ollie and the Demigod provided vital to the plot. Captain Freeman's reassignment to Starbase 80 provided poetic symmetry, calling back to her alternate self from the season's premiere. This well-crafted balance of episodic and serialized storytelling should serve as a model for future Star Trek series. Perhaps the true star for this week was, well, the Cerritos herself. The ship transformed into various iconic designs, only to return to its original form, symbolizing its unique charm. The point was driven home by Rutherford and Mariner, who reminded us why the California-class starship and its kind of scrappy mismatched crew has won our hearts. It might not have the sleekest of the Galaxy or Sovereign class, but it embodies the spirit of Star Trek and always gets the job done. The final montage celebrating the Cerritos and its crew was a heartfelt tribute, giving fans a touching farewell. It was not just one of the best finales in Star Trek history, but it was one of the best in television. It delivered emotional closure whilst leaving hope for more. And it had the grandeur of a Star Trek movie combined with the irrelevant humour of Lower Decks. The season dared to show us that laughter has place in the Star Trek universe, which has now firmly cemented itself into. I will miss Lower Decks, and I'm grateful for the 5 seasons we can revisit, and for the fact that Star Trek is richer for having it. Thanks for tuning into this, final episode of 10 Forward. Now, the Clonestar podcast, we will be back very soon with a very special Season 5 and Lower Decks recap with some incredible guests, and I can't wait for you to see that. Remember, you can catch up with more Clonestar podcasts at our Patreon, patreon.com/Clonestar, where you can join us for as little as £2, euros, or dollars a month. But until next time, live long and prosper.